My daughters wanted to send me to a nursing home, split my $4 million and move into my $2 million house. But I said, don't rush, darlings. I'm not going to die, I'm getting married. I'm 70 and getting married. Reserve a place in a nursing home for yourself, I told them. I've just started living. Don't even think that I'll give everything to you. I didn't put up with your father's betrayals so that I could share his millions with you now. That's what I told my daughters when they brought me 5 booklets with nursing homes in our state. They decided to swindle me and take over my luxurious mansion for $2 million. Girls, I didn't give birth to you so that you could poison my life. Subscribe to our channel if you're listening to this story. Write in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever witnessed similar stories. I never thought grief could be so cruel. I always imagined that after raising my children and building a life with Robert, I would be allowed a quiet, gentle old age. But now, at 70, with my hands trembling from Parkinson's, I feel like a stranger in my own home. Grief has taken its toll, yes, but betrayal has followed close behind. Robert died 6 months ago, quietly, in his sleep. My anchor, my partner of 45 years, gone. And yet, even in his absence, his warnings echo in my mind louder than his comforting voice ever did. I remember how he used to say, almost with a grin, Margaret, your daughters will make you cry. More than once. I didn't believe him then. I wish I had. My daughters, Claire and Emily, wear their charm like armor. They are both successful, articulate, polished. People see them and think they are kind, loving, devoted. But behind closed doors, they are cunning, ruthless, and determined to get what they think they deserve. Slowly, painfully, I have learned that charm can be a mask for cruelty. It began with Claire. She got married recently, and I wasn't invited to her wedding. Can you imagine? Her excuse, whispered by Emily as if it were concern, was that she didn't want anyone to see my hands trembling. Trembling hands. From Parkinson's. My hands that had once rocked them to sleep, prepared breakfast every morning, held their tears, soothed their fears. And now, to Claire, they were shameful. Then Emily started her little schemes. She insisted that my granddaughter Sophie move into the old family house. She has nowhere to go, Emily said, as if it were charity, as if she were helping. And of course, I agreed. Sophie is my heart, and I can't say no to her. But I knew that this was only the beginning. Soon, my home felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. Faucets supposedly left running, gas allegedly left on, I began to doubt myself. Was I really becoming forgetful? Was I losing my mind? My daughters were always there, hovering with fake concern, amplifying my fears. Mom, maybe you shouldn't be alone, Emily said. And Claire nodded, adding, it's dangerous for you to live without supervision. They made me question everything about myself, every memory, every decision. Then the threats began. Thinly veiled, subtle, and devastating. We could take everything, they whispered in the presence of my lawyer, the very lawyer who had helped me draw up a will so my independence was protected. My heart sank every time I remembered Robert's words. He had believed that children should earn everything on their own. He left them nothing. Nothing. And now, my daughters seemed determined to prove him right in the worst way possible. I realized then that I had a choice. I could let them break me. I could let them strip me of my dignity, my peace, my home. Or I could fight back. It was at the book club, of all places, that I met him, Richard. A widower, a little older than me, with eyes that seemed to understand every nuance of my sorrow and fury. Over discussions of novels, over tea and laughter, we shared our stories, of loss, of family betrayal, of children who thought the world owed them. And slowly, an idea began to form, both of us conspiring quietly, carefully. Richard said it simply, and I loved it immediately, they think you're fragile. They think they can control you. Let's show them the truth. But not just the truth, let's make them regret ever trying to manipulate you. My heart raced. For the first time in months, I felt alive. Angry, yes, but alive. I remembered every insult, every lie, every fake concern. And I realized, with clarity, that I would not give them the satisfaction of breaking me. I'm only 70, I whispered to myself one morning, sunlight streaming across the kitchen counter. I'm not going to die. I want to finally live for myself. I don't need a nursing home. And I don't want to go to your wedding either. I want to live for myself. The plan we began to hatch was clever, intricate. It required patience, cunning, and a cold understanding of human nature. But I was ready. They had no idea what awaited them. Every little betrayal, every whispered concern, every attempt to make me doubt myself, soon, it would all turn back on them. For the first time in years, I felt invincible. I was no longer the trembling, fearful mother they thought they could manipulate. I was awake. And I was ready. It didn't take long for the subtle cruelty of my daughters to escalate. At first, it was little things, comments about my memory, suggestions that I should have someone check in on me, casual remarks about safety in the house. But soon, the insinuations became more deliberate, more malicious. One morning, I woke to find the bathroom floor wet. My heart jumped. Had I left the tap running overnight? But no, after careful inspection, I realized the leak was cleverly staged. The faucet had been tampered with, a small trick I wouldn't have noticed, even on my best day. My daughters had done it. They were testing me, trying to see if I would panic. And when I hesitated, when I voiced my doubts aloud, Emily's soothing voice dripped over me like honey. Mom, don't worry, we'll take care of it. Maybe you shouldn't be handling things alone anymore. Claire, on the other hand, had become an expert at social manipulation. She casually mentioned my supposed forgetfulness to family friends, painting a picture of me as a woman on the brink, a mother who could no longer be trusted. It's just hard to watch her sometimes, she would say, with a sympathetic smile. And everyone nodded, agreeing, while I bit my tongue and swallowed the humiliation. Then came the gas stove incident. Or, rather, the accusation. I was accused of leaving it on, endangering the house. I knew I hadn't. But with my trembling hands, who could be sure? My lawyer tried to reassure me, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. My daughters had begun to make me question my own mind, my own senses. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I felt their eyes on me. Every time I reached for a doorknob, I imagined someone lurking, watching for my mistake. And all of this, the fear, the doubt, the constant help, was meant to accomplish one thing, to strip me of control over my property. The house, the money, the inheritance that Robert had left me, they wanted it. They thought my age, my illness, my supposed fragility would make me compliant. But I wasn't compliant. I wasn't fragile. I was furious. I remember sitting one night in my living room, staring at the framed photograph of Robert on the mantel. He had always believed in me, in my strength. Don't let them take it from you, he would have said. And I realized he was right. I couldn't let them. Not now. Not ever. It was then that I began my little experiments, carefully, quietly. I watched my daughters. I observed their habits, their weaknesses, their overconfidence. Emily had a tendency to gloat, to believe she could predict my every move. Claire, meanwhile, thought charm alone could shield her from consequences. Both of them underestimated me. Both of them would learn the hard way. Richard and I started meeting more often. We talked strategy, carefully, almost like two generals planning a campaign. We need patience, he said, his eyes gleaming with mischief. They think you're fragile. That's your advantage. We don't rush. We wait. And when the moment comes, it will be devastating. I felt alive again. The anger, the sense of injustice, it was intoxicating. Every time I saw Emily's fake concern or Claire's patronizing smile, I felt a spark ignite within me. For so long, I had been polite, measured, and careful. But now I was ready to be cunning. I was ready to fight. The first step was simple: regain control of my own mind. No more doubting myself, no more allowing them to make me feel incapable. I began keeping detailed notes, documenting everything that happened in the house. Every incident, every comment, every suspicious accident. I had proof. I had the law on my side. I had Robert's warnings in my heart. And then came the idea of psychological leverage. If they wanted to make me seem incapable, then I would turn it back on them. I would make them doubt themselves, question their own motives, and slowly unravel the sense of control they had believed they held. It wouldn't be easy. They were clever, manipulative, and patient. But so was I. And now, I had Richard. I had strategy. I had determination. And most importantly, I had nothing to lose. One morning, I watched Sophie playing in the garden, her laughter ringing through the air, and I made a promise to myself. They will not take this from me. They will not take my home. They will not take my peace. I will fight, and they will regret ever trying. The game had begun. And this time I was the one in control. It started with small things, almost nothing, and yet everything. I needed my daughters to feel confident, to think they were still in control. That was the key. Confidence is fragile, and I intended to break theirs without them ever realizing it. I began with Emily. She was meticulous, proud of her image as the perfect daughter, the one everyone thought was kind and considerate. So I let her think she was helping me. I asked her to check the taps one afternoon while I rested. She came in, all smiles, believing she was proving how thoughtful she was. Meanwhile, I had already turned the faucet back off, carefully, so there was no leak, no evidence. But I acted flustered, muttering, "Oh dear, I must be losing my mind." I watched her eyebrows twitch, a faint edge of doubt forming. Small victories, but they mattered. Claire, on the other hand, was more dangerous. She believed charm could shield her from consequences, that nothing in the world could touch her polished image. So I began leaving little notes in unexpected places, subtle, almost forgetful mistakes that only she would notice. A misplaced book, a carefully shifted piece of furniture, tiny discrepancies she couldn't quite explain. When she asked about them, I feigned confusion, shaking my hands lightly and murmuring about my forgetfulness. She walked away frowning, a seed of anxiety planted. And Sophie, oh, my sweet Sophie. I loved her too much to manipulate her. But having her in the house gave me leverage I hadn't anticipated. She became my quiet witness. Every time Emily tried to guilt me about safety or Claire tried to insinuate I was incapable, Sophie would be there, innocent and observant. One day, she asked me, "Grandma, are they trying to make you forget things?" And I hugged her tight, whispering, "Sometimes, my darling, people forget how to be kind." It was a reminder to myself as much as to her, I would not let them win. Then came the first real test, the party. Claire had insisted on inviting the family for a small gathering to celebrate some new achievement of hers. I wasn't supposed to attend, naturally. My hands, she said, might embarrass her. But I knew Richard and I could turn this to our advantage. I arrived quietly, not on the arm of a caretaker, not trembling as she feared. I arrived calm, composed, with Sophie at my side, and I smiled at the guests. They didn't see a trembling old woman. They saw a grandmother who radiated quiet dignity, who refused to be diminished. Claire's expression faltered for a moment, almost imperceptibly, when our eyes met. That small crack was enough to thrill me. From that day on, I began observing them like a hawk. Every word they spoke, every glance they gave, every tiny slip of arrogance, I catalogued it. I started to enjoy the chessboard of manipulation, playing each piece with patience and precision. Richard and I spent evenings discussing possibilities. "We need to make them fear losing control," he said one night, leaning back in his chair, eyes glinting. "Not just the money, but their certainty. Their sense of power. Once that crumbles, they'll be easy to manage." I nodded. Yes. That was exactly right. And in my quiet moments, I allowed myself to dream, not of violence or cruelty, but of justice. A poetic, perfectly measured justice that would make them realize that their mother, me, was never to be trifled with. Robert's words haunted me, but they also strengthened me. He had known. He had known they would try. And now, I would prove him right in my own way. I would not just survive, I would thrive. I would reclaim every corner of my life, every ounce of independence, and I would do it with style, wit, and precision. The daughters thought they had me cornered. They thought their schemes, their whispered threats, their staged accidents would make me compliant. But they were wrong. So very wrong. And the first signs of their undoing were already beginning to take shape, small, imperceptible, but lethal. I smiled to myself one evening as I sipped my tea. I was only 70. I was alive. And for the first time since Robert's death, I felt powerful. Yes, the game had begun. And they had no idea how dangerous I could be. It's amazing what fear can do to people. I watched it slowly creep into my daughters' faces like fog rolling over a quiet field. At first, it was subtle. A twitch of the eye, a hesitation in speech, a question that lingered too long. And I savored it. Emily had always been meticulous. She prided herself on noticing everything, keeping everything under control. But even she was beginning to doubt herself. I started leaving little things out of place, a drawer slightly ajar, a book on the wrong shelf. Nothing dangerous, nothing obvious. But enough to make her pause, to make her wonder if she was overreacting or if I was losing my mind. The irony made me smile. She had spent months convincing me I couldn't trust myself. Now, the uncertainty was hers. Claire's facade cracked in other ways. She would glance at me during gatherings, the tiniest flicker of fear in her eyes, and quickly look away. I would smile at her, innocently, as if nothing were happening, and her discomfort grew. She started overcompensating, talking louder than necessary, directing the conversation with exaggerated control, and I took careful mental notes. Every little slip, every moment of impatience, would serve me later. The house became a stage. Every room a scene, every corner a witness. I kept Sophie close, of course, but she was mostly an observer. I even began leaving small notes around the house, not for the children to find, but for me to remember. Notes about what had happened, what they had said, what they had tried. The house itself became my weapon, a tool to outsmart them at every turn. One evening, after a particularly tense encounter, I confided in Richard over the phone. "They're starting to feel it," I said, my voice low, almost giddy. Emily hesitated when I mentioned the faucet the other day. And Claire, oh, Claire's face. She thinks I'm watching her, that I know. And I do. He chuckled. Good. That's exactly what we want. Keep nudging, Margaret. Every little seed of doubt is a dagger in their armor. And I did. I nudged. I planted. I whispered little truths disguised as casual observations. Sometimes, I forgot things on purpose, watched them react, and then gently reminded them, oh, I must be imagining it. Each time, their confidence wavered. They started second-guessing, asking each other, wondering if they were losing control. It was intoxicating, this subtle power. After so many months of feeling powerless, of being told I couldn't manage my own home, I was finally the one in control. And yet, I reminded myself constantly, this was only the beginning. I wasn't done. I had to be patient. I had to let them stumble on their own arrogance. Let them think they were still winning. Let them believe their plans would succeed. And when they were least prepared, the truth, my truth, would strike. Evenings became my favorite time. I would sit in my living room, sipping tea, listening to the wind in the trees outside, and think about Robert. I remembered his words, his wisdom, his understanding of human nature. He had known this moment would come. He had known I would have to fight not just for my property, but for my dignity, for my right to live fully. And now, I was doing exactly that. There were moments, of course, when I felt anger simmer beneath the surface. Anger at their cruelty, at the way they had tried to manipulate me, at the injustice of it all. But I had learned something valuable: anger is dangerous when uncontrolled. Strategy requires calm, patience, and precision. So I practiced restraint, turning my fury into fuel, channeling it into every careful move, every calculated smile, every subtle remark. I could see the cracks forming in their armor. I could see the hesitation, the worry, the uncertainty. They were still dangerous, still clever, still relentless, but they were human. And humans are flawed. They can be outsmarted. And I was determined to do exactly that. That night, I went to bed with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I was 70, yes, but I was alive, vibrant, cunning, and in control. The daughters might have thought they were winning. They might have thought they could break me. But they were wrong. So very wrong. And I intended to prove it in the most unforgettable way possible. I whispered to myself in the darkness, I'm not done living. I'm not done fighting. And I will make sure they never, ever underestimate me again. The best part about revenge, I learned, is timing. Strike too soon, and it fizzles. Wait too long, and the target regains strength. I had waited, watched, calculated. And now, it was time. It started subtly. I made small changes around the house, little adjustments that seemed innocent but carried meaning only I understood. Faucets forgotten but actually secure, small notes left for me to remember things, even harmless spills that seemed accidental. Every incident was carefully documented, every reaction observed. The daughters were beginning to suspect, but not enough. Not yet. Emily was the first to falter. She had been pushing me to hire a caretaker, to supervise my life, claiming it was for my safety. I agreed, on my own terms. I scheduled the caretaker during hours when I knew Emily would stop by unexpectedly. And then I carefully forgot something, a small leak in the kitchen sink that I knew would catch her attention. When she stormed in, flustered, claiming, "Mom, you're at it again." I looked at her calmly, holding the teacup like it was the last thing she should see, and said, "Really, Emily? I think you need to see for yourself." She hesitated, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. I smiled politely, sip by sip, letting the moment stretch, letting her uncertainty settle. Claire, meanwhile, had grown careless. Her arrogance, her belief that charm could mask every failure, began to betray her. One afternoon, she accused me of leaving the stove on again. I had not. But instead of panicking, I let her stew. I left a faint, harmless smell of gas in the kitchen, just enough for her to think she was right. She called Emily, whispering frantic reassurances that I might indeed be losing my mind. And I, seated quietly in the living room, pretended to read a book, letting them convince themselves of my instability. I was careful, though. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about control, about teaching them not to underestimate me. Every move was precise, every reaction deliberate. The daughters had thought they could manipulate me, and now, slowly, they were beginning to manipulate themselves out of fear. And yet, the most delicious part of all this was Sophie. She had begun to notice the tension, the little inconsistencies, the way her aunts seemed to falter around me. One afternoon, she whispered, "Grandma, why do they act like you're scary?" I laughed softly, pulling her close. "Sometimes, my darling, people are scared of what they can't control. And you can't control your grandmother." Her wide eyes reflected awe, and I realized that this small girl, my granddaughter, had already learned a valuable lesson: never underestimate the strength of those who are quietly watching. Richard called one evening, his voice low and excited. "They're starting to crack," he said. "Keep it subtle, keep it slow. Every hesitation, every doubt, their fuel. And soon, the momentum will be unstoppable." I hung up the phone and walked through the house, inspecting every corner, every room. It all felt like a chessboard now. Every piece accounted for, every possibility mapped out. I could hear the daughters whispering outside the kitchen door, plotting their next move, believing they were still ahead. The thrill of anticipation coursed through me. Then came the first public victory. At a family dinner, Claire tried to lecture me about responsibility and safety, in front of friends who had come for a casual meal. I listened patiently, nodding, holding my fork with deliberate calm. And then, with the quietest of smiles, I corrected her gently, pointing out the little details she had gotten wrong. Guests exchanged glances. Claire's confident expression faltered. She stumbled over her words. Her audience was watching, and for the first time, she looked uncertain, vulnerable. I felt a rush of satisfaction. The first cracks were showing, and I had barely begun. They had tried to manipulate me, to make me doubt myself, to steal my independence. But now, the tide had turned. Every carefully staged accident they had orchestrated, every whisper of doubt, every attempt to control me had backfired. And I was savoring every moment. That night, as I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window watching the stars, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. They had tried to cage me, to control me, to break me, but I was free, more alive than I had been in years. And I knew the best was yet to come. I woke that morning feeling lighter than I had in months, years, even. The tension that had coiled in my chest, the fear that my daughters would succeed in breaking me, was gone. I had played my hand carefully, quietly, deliberately, and now, the moment of reckoning had arrived. My life with my husband was never a fairy tale. I once dreamed of becoming a singer, but he was jealous, unbearably so. He forbade me from performing in restaurants, from standing on stage, from living the life I wanted. He, on the other hand, never restrained himself. There were other women. So many other women. And I always knew exactly who they were, and when. But I stayed. I fought for our marriage until the very end, not because I forgave him, but because I wanted my daughters to grow up in a real family. There were years when he tried to stop, when he turned his attention to us instead of his lovers, and those rare years were the happiest our family ever had. But now I feel a different kind of betrayal. A deeper one. My own children are betraying me. And it hurts so much more than anything my husband ever did. So I'm about to do something that will change everything between us. I sneak into my eldest daughter's house, walk into her kitchen, and turn on the faucet. I know I have 30 minutes before she comes back. The water will flood the bathroom and part of the first floor, a small disaster, but it's my revenge. Revenge for what they tried to do with my house. Then I drive to my younger daughter's home and take back the documents she stole from me, my will, my rights, my inheritance. But it's not enough. It doesn't soothe me. So I open her drawer and take something else, architectural plans and maps, documents she desperately needs for work. Let her feel what it's like to live in a world where people try to erase your memory, to make you doubt yourself, to make you feel like a fool. On my way out, I notice a photo of my son-in-law, the one who laughed at my trembling hands, mocking me behind my back. I glance at the little sugar barrel on the counter and think, why not? I slip just enough laxative into it to teach him a lesson. Well, George, let's see how funny it'll be when you're the one shaking in the bathroom. Cruel? No. Fair. Today, I'm not just their mother. Today, I am karma. Today, I'm their teacher. It started simply, as most victories do. I called my lawyer, Richard, at my side, and confirmed every detail of the will, every clause, every contingency. The $4 million Robert had left me, the $2 million house, they were mine, fully protected, legally untouchable. My daughters could threaten, manipulate, and whisper as much as they wanted. None of it mattered. Legally, morally, emotionally, they had no power over me. Claire and Emily were in the kitchen when I called them to the table. I had asked them to join me for a family discussion, and they came, unsuspecting, confident in their imagined dominance. Their expressions faltered the instant they saw my calm, composed demeanor. I smiled at them, a small, perfectly measured smile. "Girls, we need to talk," I said softly. "About respect, about honesty, and about boundaries." They exchanged glances, but I held their attention. I told them everything, not in anger, not in accusation, but with clarity and precision. I reminded them of the staged leaks, the fake accidents, the fear they had tried to instill in me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I simply stated the facts. Their faces went pale. Emily tried to interject, stammering something about concern and love. I raised a hand. Enough. I don't need supervision. I don't need your fake concern. And I certainly don't need your approval to live my life. Claire's arrogance faltered completely. But, Mom, she began, voice trembling. I shook my head gently. No. This ends today. I am 70, yes. But I am alive. I am strong. I am fully capable of making my own decisions. And from now on, you will respect that, or face the consequences. The consequences, of course, were subtle, but devastating. I had already documented every attempt they had made to manipulate me. Any further attempts would now be legally and socially damning. I had carefully set the stage to protect myself while asserting my authority. The daughters could threaten lawsuits, whisper lies, or try to take control, but anyone who saw the full picture would side with me. Sophie watched quietly from the side, wide-eyed, absorbing the power of her grandmother's voice, the calm confidence I had cultivated. I took her hand and squeezed it. Remember this, my darling, I whispered. Never let anyone make you feel small. Never let anyone take your life from you. You are strong, stronger than you know. After that day, everything shifted. Claire and Emily retreated, their schemes faltering, their confidence shattered. They no longer whispered behind my back. They no longer attempted to manipulate my actions. My home became my sanctuary once again, filled with laughter, warmth, and the freedom Robert had always believed I deserved. Richard and I continued to meet, but now our meetings were not about strategy or revenge, they were about living. About discovering joy at 70, about finding love and companionship after loss. We laughed, we shared stories, we explored the world of possibilities that had been denied to me for so long. I learned something profound through all of this: life doesn't end when you reach 70, when your body trembles, when the people you love turn against you. Life begins when you decide it does, when you reclaim your power, when you refuse to be manipulated or diminished. And so, I live now for myself. I travel, I write, I read, I laugh. I go to book clubs and gatherings, not to be watched or judged, but to be alive, fully, vibrantly alive. I go to weddings if I choose, not because someone tells me I must. I host Sophie in my home with love and freedom, and together we savor every day. The daughters learned a hard lesson, one they will not forget. They discovered that their mother, even at 70, is formidable, intelligent, and fiercely alive. They learned that wealth does not grant power over someone's spirit, and that manipulation can easily turn against the manipulator. And as for me, I finally understand the truth Robert had always known: strength is not in avoiding life's challenges, but in facing them with courage, wit, and dignity. I am 70, yes. But I am not finished. I am just beginning. And this time, I live for myself. The months after the wedding were nothing short of extraordinary. I woke each morning not to demands, guilt, or manipulation, but to the gentle sunlight spilling across my bedroom and the soft, familiar voice of Richard beside me. Life felt like a gift I was finally unwrapping with full awareness, savoring every detail. I traveled more than I ever had. There were trips to quaint European villages, where cobblestone streets and flower-filled balconies reminded me of simpler joys. We wandered through art galleries in Paris, attended classical concerts in Vienna, and sailed along the Amalfi Coast, laughing and sharing stories that stretched into the night. Each adventure reinforced what I had always known deep down: life at 70 could be thrilling, rich, and endlessly vibrant. My home became a haven for creativity and joy. Sophie and I redecorated rooms together, filling them with books, sunlight, and plants that she adored. I hosted intimate dinner parties for friends and acquaintances, celebrating life without the shadow of judgment or control. I learned that freedom isn't just about what you escape, it's about what you create in its place. Richard and I even started small philanthropic projects, helping local communities, funding reading programs for children, and supporting causes close to our hearts. I discovered a new kind of fulfillment in giving, not because anyone demanded it, but because it made me feel alive and connected. And the best part? My daughters remained distant, but now it no longer mattered. They had once tried to control me, to steal my peace, to break me, but I had reclaimed everything. My wealth, my home, my happiness, and most importantly, my spirit were untouchable. I could choose whom to invite, whom to trust, and how to spend every moment of the rest of my life. One evening, as Richard and I sat on the terrace overlooking the lake, Sophie asleep inside, I sipped my wine and took a deep breath. The world felt vast, full of possibilities. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like a mother or a widow defined by duty. I felt like a woman defined by choice. I never imagined life could be this beautiful at 70, I whispered to Richard. You've earned it, he said, taking my hand. And you've only just begun. I smiled, looking at the stars reflected on the water. Yes, I was 70, but I was unstoppable. I was free. And from now on, I would live fully, fiercely, and without compromise. For the first time, I understood completely, happiness isn't given. It's claimed. And I had claimed mine, utterly, unapologetically, and forever.